breathing and the respiratory part. Now, today we're going to see the various places or the various steps that are involved during the process of respiration. So first there is breathing, which is normally called as the pulmonary ventilation, which is basically the taking in of the atmospheric air and the giving out of the carbon dioxide rich air, right? Then the air that comes in our body that gets diffused between the alveoli and the blood, meaning the air that contains the oxygen that gets transported to the whole entire part of our body. So that happens because of the diffusion. So diffusion of the gases oxygen and carbon dioxide, this is CO2, not CO, takes place across the alveolar membrane to the blood capillaries surrounding it. The membrane is very thin and it is richly supplied with blood vessels. Now you all know that the thickness of the alveolar membrane is really thin, right? It's like millimeters. After that, there comes the transportation of the gases. Now, the blood is normally the you can say transporting media for both the gases, whether it is oxygen, whether it is carbon dioxide. So, it transports the O2 from the alveoli to the different parts of the body, and then it transports the CO2 from the body to the alveoli so that it can go out. Then comes the diffusion of gases that takes place between the blood and the tissues. So oxygen is diffused from the blood to tissues, and then the CO2 is diffused from the tissues into the blood. And lastly, there comes the utilization of oxygen. Now this is at the cellular level, wherein we are going to utilize the oxygen so as to break down the biomolecules like carbohydrates and proteins and stuff, so as to release energy. So that is cellular respiration. This is not what we are going to study in this chapter. As far as the rest of the topics are concerned, we will be studying. Now, the principle of our breathing, it is based on the inverse proportionality of the pressure and the volume. We know that when the pressure increases, the volume decreases and vice versa. Now see, normally we have two types of muscles that are helpful during the process of breathing in and breathing out. That is the intercostal muscle and the abdominal muscles along with the diaphragm. So whenever the muscles they contract, what happens is that the volume of the thoracic cavity, when we are talking about the inspiration, so at that point of time, the volume of the thoracic cavity, it increases. And so does the volume of the lung cavity, that is the pulmonary cavity, as a result of which the pressure decreases. Now, the pressure of the gases on the outside, it is more as compared to the inside of the lungs. So, the gases from the outside, they get diffused into our body. Now, during the process of inspiration, the external intercostal muscles are important. Wait, I'm going to use NCERT only. See, the process of breathing in is called as the inspiration, and the process of breathing out is called as expiration, right? Inspiration and expiration means breathing in and breathing out. Now, the whole entire movement of the air into the lungs and out of the lungs, it is carried out by creating a pressure gradient. What is a gradient? Gradient means anything that will be higher at one level and lower at another level. That's a gradient. Pressure gradient, volume gradient, temperature gradient, all sorts of gradients are present. Here, we are mostly concerned with the pressure difference or the pressure gradient between the lungs and the atmosphere. Now what happens? Because of the negative pressure, the air comes into our lungs. How? Because when we breathe in, our external intercostal muscles contract and our diaphragm, it becomes flattened, isn't it? So as a result of which, the volume of the chest cavity increases. Now, if the volume of the chest cavity is increasing, the volume of the pulmonary cavity, that is the lung cavity, that also increases. And if the volume is increasing, obviously the pressure will decrease. So now, in this point of time, there is negative pressure in the lungs with respect to the atmospheric pressure. So, as a result of which, the gases from a high pressure region, that is the atmosphere, they diffuse into the low pressure region, that is in our lungs. That is what happens during the process of inspiration. Now, expiration is the same exact thing, but everything in the opposite way. Now, the ribs, instead of being out, they'll go back to the normal state. The volume decreases, right? So, if the volume of the thoracic cavity is decreasing and the volume of the pulmonary cavity is decreasing, so what will happen to the pressure? It will increase, right? Now, the pressure inside our lungs is more as compared to the pressure outside. So now the gases would move from this higher concentration region to the lower concentration region, and thereby we exhale or expiration is done. Is it clear?
Yeah.
Now, for the whole entire process of breathing in and breathing out, we need the diaphragm and we need the set of muscles that are called as the external and the internal intercostal muscles. And where are these muscles present? They are present between the ribs. So, the gradient that we are generating time to time, that is because of these muscles and the diaphragm. This much is clear, students?
Yeah.
Any doubts?
Yes. No.
So remember that now this was about breathing in, but when we talk about breathing out, so in that case, now the muscles will be relaxing. Okay, they will be relaxing. So relaxation of the diaphragm, now it will go from the flat state to the dome shaped again, and the intercostal muscles, they will also go normal, as a result of which the volume will start decreasing. Okay, so when the volume will decrease, the pressure will increase. And intrapulmonary pressure, what is the meaning of intrapulmonary pressure, students?
Inside the lungs pressure.
Intra means within. Pulmonary refers to anything related with the lung. So within the lungs, when the pressure increases and outside the pressure is low, so the gas would move, or you can say expel out. So we have the ability to increase the strength of inspiration and expiration with the help of additional muscles in the abdomen, right? So because of our abdominal muscles, we can breathe in, we can take a deep breath, right? And we can like slowly breathe out also. So that is because of the additional abdominal muscles that we have. Now, on an average, every minute, a healthy human being is going to breathe 12 to 16 times. If the human is not breathing 12 to 16 times and he or she is breathing more, then that means the lung health is not that good. Okay, this can be because of various reasons. Now, the volume or the amount of air involved in the breathing movements, they can also be estimated by using a spirometer. Spirometer is a device that you can use to find out the different volumes. Just like now we have to find out the respiratory volumes and the capacities. Now see, when we talk about the respiratory volumes, it is like the amount of air in terms of milliliters that we are talking about. Volume means that only. Whereas the capacities, it's the combination of volumes. When you add some volumes together, you get capacities. So the first one is tidal volume. Tidal volume is the volume of air or the amount of air that you inspire or expire during a normal respiration. Meaning you're not tense, you're not breathing heavily, you're not worried. In that case, when you're normally perfectly breathing, so the amount of air that you take in and the amount of air that you give out, that is the tidal volume. And how much is it? 500 milliliters in a healthy human. Now from this 500 milliliters, when you want to find out for per minute, so you multiply the 500 with 12 and then with 16. So you get 6,000 to 8,000 milliliters of air per minute. This is the normal case scenario. After that, there comes the inspiratory reserve volume, IRV. So this is when now you are deep breathing, like forcefully breathing in. So this averages to 2,500 to 3,000 milliliters of air. Expiratory reserve, when you're forcefully breathing out. So in that case, 1,000 milliliters to 1,100 milliliters. These all values you have to learn. There's no way out. Other than that, there comes the residual volume. See, when we breathe out, it doesn't mean that our lungs have no air in it. Or else the lungs, like how you blow a balloon and then you suck out the air, how the balloon will become limpy, right? It would like get stuck into the walls of each other. Same way the lungs would also happen like that. They will collapse. So as to protect from collapsing, we have the said amount of air that is remaining in the lungs. No matter how much you breathe out or breathe in, that said amount of volume of air is going to be in the lungs. And that is what we call as the residual volume. Residual means remaining volume. The meaning of the word residual itself is remaining.
Ma'am, we already discussed all this stuff, right?
I know. We have a new student in the class, so I'm doing it yet again so that you people have a revision and she'll be caught up. Okay? So, Nidhi, you are understanding the things? Huh? Sanidhi?
Yes.
Okay. Wherever you have doubts, please feel free to ask. This is to everyone. So, the amount of air that is still left in the lungs, we call that as the residual volume. And that is around 1,100 to 1,200 milliliters. Now, when you add these volumes together, you will get the capacity. So, the first capacity is the inspiratory capacity, the total volume of air the person can breathe in. So, that will be the tidal volume plus the inspiratory capacity. I mean, the inspiratory reserve volume. Together, when you add them, you will get the inspiratory capacity. The same like that is the expiratory capacity. You add the tidal volume along with the expiratory reserve volume. So you see how we are adding volumes together and thereby we are getting the different capacities. After that, there comes the functional residual capacity. So that is the volume of air that will remain in the lungs after a normal expiration. That will be expiratory reserve volume plus the residual volume. That even if you are forcefully breathing out, the volume of air that will remain in your lungs, that will be called as the functional residual capacity. Then comes, yes, someone asking anything?
Ma'am, what's the difference between IRV and FRC then?
IRV,
And
inspiratory.
FRC.
FRC is the functional residual capacity, meaning when you are normally expiring, the volume of air that is going to remain in the lungs, that is the FRC. And what is the other thing? IRV.
Yeah.
IRV is for forceful inspiration. When you're taking a deep, like unusual breath, that's the case. Forcefully. When you're breathing in forcefully, that is the inspiratory reserve volume. And here, it's like after normally breathing out, how much amount residual, like how much amount will be left? So that will be ERV plus R. Residual volume is going to be there anyway. But along with that, there will be the expiratory reserve volume. Clear?
Yeah, ma'am, okay.
There comes the vital capacity. So vital capacity, it is the maximum volume of air a person can breathe in after he or she has forcefully expired. So this is ERV plus TV plus IR. This is the maximum amount of air the person can breathe out after a forced inspiration, or the maximum amount of air the person can breathe in after a forced expiration. Clear? And the last capacity is the total lung capacity, meaning once the forced inspiration is done, when you are breathing in, you're taking a deep, deep breath in. So the amount of air that can fit in your lungs, that will be the total lung capacity, which will include the RV, ERV, the tidal volume, inspiratory capacity. Like all of the volumes together will be your total lung capacity. Or you can say vital capacity plus the residual volume. It's the same exact thing, right? It's like a different just combination. Clear? So volumes and capacities are clear to everyone. Does anyone have any doubts? Anything to ask? Sure. Now comes the exchange of gases, for which we have to study the thickness of the membrane first. So the membrane, this is the, see this balloon-like structure that you see, this is the alveoli, and the thickness of it, that we have to study. So this is the diffusion membrane that we are talking about. So the diffusion membrane is made up of three major layers. Firstly, the thin squamous epithelium of the alveoli. Okay, epithelium meaning the outermost layer of the alveoli, which is made up of squamous tissues. Okay, squamous epithelium. Then there is the endothelium, endothelium of the alveolar capillary, meaning the capillary of the alveoli. Okay, that will be the next thing. And then in between them, there will be like a cementing material, which is the basement membrane. Okay, it will support the epithelium and endothelium both in between them. Okay, this yellow portion of the drawing that you see, the yellow portion, that is your basement membrane. And it's thin. Trust me, it's very, very thin, that all in all, if you take the epithelium of alveoli, the basement membrane and the endothelium together also, the thickness would only be, you can say, even many, many, many times less than a millimeter. It's that thin. And in our body, all of the factors have been made in such a way that the oxygen will be moving from the alveoli to the tissues and the CO2 will be moving out. Like our body is made in such a way that the oxygen has to come in and the CO2 has to go out. Is it clear? Any doubts? Does anyone have anything to say? You people not liking the chapter?
We already did this.
Okay. Now we're talking about the transportation of gases, wherein we saw how the gases, they get transported by different components of the body. Right. Now our blood, it is the medium to transport the oxygen also as well as the CO2. No discrimination. Now 97% of the oxygen is transported by the RBC containing the hemoglobin. The remaining 3% gets carried by the plasma. In the case of CO2, there are three ways that CO2 could be carried. 20 to 25% gets carried by the RBC through the hemoglobin. 70% of it gets carried as a bicarbonate ion, HCO3 minus ion, this ion. And the 7% of it gets carried in the dissolved state. So there are different percentage of the gases that will be carried out to the different component. Now, the hemoglobin, the reason why our RBCs are called as red blood cells, because they contain the red colored iron containing pigment called as the hemoglobin. Okay. That is why we are advised to have iron rich food so that we have more and more hemoglobin in our body. Now oxygen, see this hemoglobin, it can bind with oxygen as well as it can bind with the carbon dioxide. Okay, it has the binding capability to both of them. But that depends upon the partial pressure. I taught about partial pressure in the previous class. You can explain. Partial pressure. Who can explain partial pressure? No one. So it's good that I'm repeating the topic. See, if there is a vessel, okay, if there is a vessel which has a mixture of different gases, there's O2, CO2, carbon monoxide, different gases are there. Now the pressure which will be exerted by each of the single gases, like pressure exerted by oxygen, carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, that will be called as the partial pressure. So what is partial pressure? It is the pressure which will be exerted by individual gases in the mixture of gases. Got it?
Yes, ma'am.
So now this oxygen, it can bind with the hemoglobin in a reversible manner. Why reversible manner, students? Reversible, you understand that. For example, if I write hemoglobin plus oxygen, this reversibility that we are talking about. Why reversible? Who can explain this? Why?
Because the O2 needs to be transported, it will diffuse with everything.
Yeah, 100% yes. Because the oxygen ultimately has to be, made, you can say separate from the hemoglobin and sent to the different body parts so that our body parts could utilize it. Had it been irreversible kind of reaction, then the oxygen would never, you can say, break from the hemoglobin molecule. And
Can't the
thereby stay
hemoglobin also diffuse,
diffuse. No,
like along with the oxygen?
hemoglobin is not a gas, no. Gas is only diffuse. No? That's why. Okay. So it's like hemoglobin will take it to the part where it has to diffuse. Then hemoglobin's job is done. It's like, okay, now you do on your own. Okay. And that is the case. So hemoglobin, it can carry maximum of 4 molecules of oxygen. Okay. Binding of oxygen with hemoglobin is primarily related to the partial pressure of oxygen. If there is more partial pressure of CO2, or you can say what are the factors that affect the binding of hemoglobin with oxygen? First of all, there will be the partial pressure of carbon dioxide, then the H plus ion concentration and the temperature. These things can interfere with the binding of the hemoglobin with oxygen. Okay, and a sigmoid curve is obtained when percentage saturation of hemoglobin is plotted against the partial pressure. So it's like this curve that you see, it is a sigmoid curve, S-shaped graph that you get. Okay. And this is when you're talking about the partial pressure of oxygen and when it is going to combine with the hemoglobin molecule. Now remember that when let's just say the hemoglobin has combined with the oxygen. Okay. Now it's near a tissue that has more CO2. And now since it has more CO2, so it will be needing more O2. So now the hemoglobin will dissociate from the oxygen. Dissociate means be removed or separated from the oxygen and the oxygen will be delivered. So this curve that we are talking about, this sigmoid curve, it is the curve that tells us about the saturation of hemoglobin against the partial pressure of oxygen. And this is called as the oxygen dissociation curve. Now see, whenever there will be high PO2, meaning high partial pressure of oxygen, when there will be more oxygen, low partial pressure of carbon dioxide, low H plus ion and low temperature. Okay. So what all I said? First of all, there will be high PO2, meaning there is more and more oxygen molecule. When there will be low PCO2. Okay. Partial pressure of CO2 will be less. And when there will be low pH, okay, hydrogen ion tells us about the pH, right? When there will be low pH, also low temperature. These 4 conditions, under these 4 conditions, the hemoglobin will bind with O2. It will combine with O2. Why? Because there is more O2 available. So now hemoglobin has this opportunity of binding with the oxygen. Clear? But if you reverse all of this, when there will be low PO2, high PCO2, when there will be high H plus, and there will be high temperature. In all of the cases, the HbO2 will dissociate into Hb plus O2. So dissociation of the dissociation of the oxyhemoglobin is going to happen when there will be less amount of oxygen anywhere. Whereas if there is high amount of oxygen, what will happen? The hemoglobin that is there, it will go and bind with the oxygen. Getting my point?
Yeah.
Have you people understood this fact? So that is why whenever, if I'm giving you two places, one is the body cell, the other is the alveoli. Now tell me, in the alveoli, will the hemoglobin dissociate with the oxygen or associate with the oxygen?
Associate.
Associate. Why?
Because, I mean, when we breathe in, the oxygen will be decreased in the alveoli only, right?
So the amount of oxygen in the alveoli will be high, which will favor the formation or the combining of the hemoglobin with the oxygen. That is why in the alveoli, the hemoglobin will associate with the oxygen. But if I give you the example of tissues, so at that time, the hemoglobin, will it associate or will it dissociate?
Dissociate.
It will dissociate. Dissociate means get separated from the oxygen and deliver the oxygen. Clear? So whenever there is high oxygen partial pressure, low CO2 pressure, and less H plus ion and less temperature. So all these factors, they are favorable so that oxyhemoglobin could be formed. Students, tell me one thing. Hemoglobin plus oxygen is called as oxyhemoglobin. Hemoglobin plus CO2 is called as
Carboxyhemoglobin. Oh no.
This is the biggest mistake. Carboxyhemoglobin is when hemoglobin combines with carbon monoxide. That is carboxyhemoglobin. When hemoglobin combines with CO2, it is called as carbaminohemoglobin. Okay. So you people can write that down somewhere, that HB. Wait, I'll open my notes. So you can write it in this way, that HB plus O2, it gives you HbO2, and this is called as oxyhemoglobin. Okay, oxyhemo. Yes.
What is carbonic anhydrase too?
Carbonic anhydrase. See, carbonic anhydrase is an enzyme that will be responsible for the formation of bicarbonate. We will see that. Okay, it will be responsible for the transportation of CO2. So the carb amino hemoglobin, that is the combination of the hemoglobin along with the CO2 molecule. And whenever the hemoglobin will be combining with carbon monoxide, then it will become HbCO, and that is what you call as carboxyhemoglobin. Okay, is it clear to everyone?
Yeah.
All right. Okay, now let us move forward and talk about. But if you reverse the situation, if the amount of partial pressure of the oxygen is less and high PCO2 and high H plus concentration, high temperature, where does this exist? It exists in the tissues, the body cells. Then the oxygen will dissociate from the oxyhemoglobin, right? And then it gets, you can say, supplied to the tissues which needs it, because the tissues will die if they don't get oxygen. So this clearly indicates that oxygen gets bound to the hemoglobin in the lung surface and it gets dissociated at the tissues level. And remember this data that every 100 milliliters of oxygenated blood, it can deliver 5 milliliters of oxygen to the tissues under normal conditions. 100 milliliter will be delivering 5 milliliters of oxygen.
What happens to the hemoglobin after it does its work?
Nothing, it's ready to bind to another oxygen molecule.
So hemoglobin is always present.
It's only for 21 days because after 21 days, the RBCs die. And then new RBCs are formed. So new hemoglobin molecule is made. Yeah. That is why you might have heard why do we donate blood so easily? If we donated blood and we would be less of blood, then no one will ever donate, right? We donate it because normally the blood gets formed yet again after a period of certain time. So once the hemoglobin is done, and it will, like the RBCs will stay alive for 21 days and then they will die. And then new set of RBCs will be made. Okay. Any doubts? So this was all there is to know as far as the transportation of the oxygen is concerned. Now we'll talk about the transportation of carbon dioxide. So CO2 is carried by the hemoglobin as carb-amino hemoglobin. And how much percentage? So 20 to 25% only. This binding is related again to the partial pressure of CO2. PO2, that is the partial pressure of oxygen, it is a major factor which could affect the binding of hemoglobin with CO2. Whenever the partial pressure of CO2 is high and the partial pressure of oxygen is low, so more binding of the CO2 occurs, isn't it? Why? Because there is more amount of CO2 and less amount of O2. But when this partial pressure of CO2 will be low and PO2 will be high, just like in the case of alveoli. So in that case, what will happen? The dissociation of carbamino will happen. See students, in the lungs, the association of oxyhemoglobin is happening, but dissociation of carbamino hemoglobin is happening, isn't it? Because the CO2 has to go out. So the HbCO2 is getting broken, but HbO2 is getting formed in the alveoli. Whereas in the tissues, the HbO2 is getting broken so that the tissues could get the oxygen, and HbCO2 is being formed. Are you getting me? Are you following me? Okay. So in the alveoli, the dissociation of the CO2 happens from carbamino hemoglobin, and CO2, which is bound to the hemoglobin, from the tissues, it is delivered at the alveoli. And then from the alveoli, it goes out, breathe out. RBCs, they contain a very high concentration of the enzyme called as carbonic anhydrase. This is an enzyme that is present in the plasma as well. And what it does is that with the help of carbonic anhydrase, whenever the CO2 combines with the water molecule in the presence of the enzyme carbonic anhydrase, so that forms the bicarbonate, okay, H2CO3. And when in the presence of carbonic anhydrase, when you break down this molecule, you get bicarbonate ion. And you people know that the CO2, it gets traveled, or you can say transported as bicarbonate ion also, isn't it? Because CO3 is there. So CO2 is there, no? Only extra oxygen is there, isn't it? So that is how it is getting transported as bicarbonate ion. The CO2, firstly, it is combining with the water and making H2CO3. In the CO3, CO2 is present or not? Carbon dioxide is present, isn't it? Then this molecule of H2CO3, it's getting broken down to become the bicarbonate ion. And this is how the CO2 is getting transported yet again. So at the tissue site, where the partial pressure of carbon dioxide is high due to catabolism.
Ma'am, can you explain again?
See, hemoglobin part you people have understood how the CO2 is getting transported by hemoglobin? Now, remember, I told you that the CO2 can get transported by hemoglobin. It can get transported dissolved state in the plasma, and it gets transported in the form of bicarbonate ion. HCO3 minus, this is the bicarbonate ion. This is the ion. Okay. So what am I saying? That the CO2 is getting transported in the form of bicarbonate ion, meaning in this CO2 is present. Right? If you remove one of the O, you will get HCO2.
Yeah.
CO2 is there. Now, to be transported in the form of bicarbonate ion, how does it happen? So, the carbon dioxide which is present, it starts to combine with the water molecule that is there in our body with the help of the enzyme called as carbonic anhydrase. This enzyme is present in the RBC. Okay. So this enzyme will help the CO2 molecule to combine with the water to make H2CO3. This is a compound. And when in the presence of the same enzyme, the compound will be broken down into its ionic forms, and then the CO2 is getting transported in the form of bicarbonate ion. This is the second method of transportation of CO2. The first one was hemoglobin that we have discussed, association, dissociation. Now this is in the form of bicarbonate ion. Is it clear to everyone? See, this is why I don't like NCERT, because they are not clearly telling you what is it, like what is happening. Suddenly from carbamino, they are jumping to carbonic anhydrase. But you people have understood, na? Okay. Now, the CO2, whenever the partial pressure of carbon dioxide will be higher because of catabolism. Catabolism is the breakdown reactions that happens in our body, right? Whenever anything gets broken down so as to release energy, that is catabolism. When anything gets formed, that is anabolism. A sum total of catabolism and anabolism is metabolism.
Is it metabolism and emulsification same thing?
Breakdown of anything is catabolism. But this is enzymatic. Emulsification is not enzymatic. Catabolism is enzymatic, meaning it happens in the presence of enzyme. Okay, so at that time, the CO2 diffuses into the blood, meaning RBC, like it combines with the hemoglobin, it gets dissolved in the plasma, and also it forms the bicarbonate ion. And then at the alveolar site, whenever the PCO2 is less, obviously, so now it will dissociate from the hemoglobin and then it will be sent out as CO2. So thus, the CO2 that is trapped as the bicarbonate ion at the tissue level and transported to the alveoli, now it gets released out as the CO2 molecule. Now remember, just like how for every 100 ml of oxygenated blood, 4 ml of, 5 ml of O2 was being transported. Here, 4 ml of CO2 is transported to the alveoli. Clear? Any doubts anywhere? 100% clear?
5 ml of O2 was in oxygenated blood, right?
When the oxygenated blood was being transported to the whole entire body, right, to the tissues. But here, 4 ml of CO2 is being transported to the alveoli because CO2 is nowhere needed in our body. It's bad, it's foul. It has to be removed as soon as possible. So, any doubts up until now, students? Anything you want to ask? Nothing? Okay. Then comes the regulation of respiration. See, in our body, the chapter is about to be over. See, in our body, the respiration could be regulated. Regulated means you can increase, you can decrease, just like how regulators are. Okay. So, human beings, they have a significant ability to maintain and moderate the respiratory rhythm to suit the demands of the body. For example, how many of you have been to hill stations? Or any kind of hill? Only
I am
one?
from one.
Huh?
I am from one. I'm from Kashmir.
You're from?
Kashmir.
Ah, so you live there. Okay, it's a different thing
Yeah.
for you. You are different. It's not same for us. Because if we go to high altitude you people understand, at high heights. So what happens there? We start feeling a shortness of breath, right? You feel like the oxygen that is there, it's not enough. So at that time, what happens? Normally, you people only tell me with experience. If I take you somewhere where there
You
is
start
less oxygen,
inspiring more.
expiring or inspiring?
Inspiring.
You start breathing in heavily. You're like you're running out of breath. You're like you're wanting. But she who already lives in Kashmir or who's from Kashmir, it's different for her. She has been there all her life, so her breathing rate will be normal because it's not normal for us, but it's normal for her to live at that height. So in our body, there is like the change of this respiratory rhythm according to the demand. Okay. And how is it done? How do you know to breathe heavily or how do you know to breathe fine? It's because you have a neural system well in position for that. Okay. A proper central nervous system and a neural system is present. Now, in our brain, if you people remember from class 10th, our brain has a medulla region, hindbrain. In our brain, there is a region called as the respiratory rhythm center. And this is responsible for the regulation of our breathing. Okay. So another center present in the pons region of the brain is called as pneumotaxic center. Now, medulla and pons, all of you know, are the parts of the hindbrain, right? People have studied in class 10. So, what happens is that these two, respiratory rhythm center in the medulla, pneumotaxic center in the pons, they regulate the respiratory rhythm. Okay. Now, what happens whenever the neural signal will come from the center, they can reduce the duration of inspiration. Like your breathing rate could go fine or it could go heavier. Then there is a chemosensitive area adjacent to the rhythm center. So respiratory rhythm center is there in the medulla. Adjacent to that respiratory rhythm center, there is a chemosensitive area. A sensitive area that is sensitive to chemicals. Which one? Carbon dioxide. So whenever there will be, you can say, more amount of CO2 in our body, this neural center will get activated. It will make our body inspire more so that we get more and more oxygen. Getting my point? So this chemosensitive area is the area which is very much sensitive for the levels of CO2. If the level of CO2 is more, this area will get activated and it will make the rhythm center, you can say, increase the activity and increase the respiratory process so that the CO2 could be eliminated out and more oxygen could be taken in. Apart from that, receptors associated with aortic arch and carotid artery, they also recognize the changes in the CO2 and the H plus concentration. And accordingly, see, the whole thing runs on these three things. The partial pressure of CO2, the partial pressure of O2, the hydrogen ion concentration, and the temperature. These 1, 2, 3, and 4. These 4 parameters are everything for our respiratory rhythm or respiration in general. Okay. And accordingly, we breathe in and we breathe out. That depends upon the things that are present in our surrounding. Getting my point?
Yeah.
Any doubts? So the role of oxygen in the regulation of respiratory rhythm is quite insignificant as such. Because why? Because it's because of the partial pressure of CO2 only that is regulating everything. No, like our body doesn't pay attention to the partial pressure of oxygen. Rather, it pays attention to the partial pressure of the CO2. That matters. Because as a result of that, oxygen can be regulated.
Ma'am, where is the aortic arch present in the aorta?
Yeah. And then the carotid artery over here. Clear? So this is how the whole entire process of regulation happens. Now, you people also open your NCERT book, read this thing, and tell me if there's anything you have not understood. I'll explain again.
I don't have.
You don't have. Okay, you read the thing that you see on the screen then. And the rest of you who have, you read that.
From where we have did today or regulation of respiration?
This regulation, this regulation part.
Ma'am, what do you mean by pneumotaxic center can monitor the function of the respiratory rhythm system center?
See, pneumotaxic center, it is a center which is responsible for either increasing or decreasing the respiratory rate. So that is why it is regulating. Again, it will depend upon the concentration of CO2 that is there. If there is more CO2, it will make the respiratory rhythm faster. If there is less, it will slow it down. So this is like a sensitive area.
That's what the respiratory rhythm center is doing, right?
Both of them are doing. Respiratory rhythm center present in the medulla. Pneumotaxic center present in the pons. Both are present in the hind. Clear? So the whole entire hind brain, which consists of the medulla and the this thing pons region, both of them are responsible for that. Clear? Actually, students, tell me one thing. If I say that at the tissue level, the affinity of hemoglobin to the oxygen decreases. Can you explain this to me? At tissue level, if the affinity of oxygen to the hemoglobin decreases, what happens? Or why is it happening? Explain this.
Because the hemoglobin and the oxygen are getting dissociated over there. Won't the oxygen diffuse
So
into the tissue?
affinity is decreasing. So what is the significance of that affinity decreasing?
The O2 can freely move and decrease.
Yeah, because if the affinity would be high, the O2 will be forming a stronger bond with the hemoglobin and it will never be able to dissociate. Now, I'll tell you one more thing, students. The reason why I mentioned the hilly areas and stuff is because when we go to the hilly areas, we feel like we are getting out of breath, right? But if you stay there for, I think, a day, okay, then you do not feel that shortness of breath. Why? Because your bodies have been made acclimatized. What is acclimatization? It is the process wherein your body will adapt to the situation, the environmental condition that is there. If there is less, you can say high pressure, right? So it will adapt to it. And at the same time, your more and more RBCs will be formed so that there will be more hemoglobin in your body so that it would carry more oxygen in your body. So at hilly areas, we feel like not so fine at the beginning, but after living there for one day, we feel fine. We start feeling fine. Why? Because we get acclimatized. Our body gets adapted to that situation. The amount of hemoglobin or the amount of RBCs increase and that happens. Clear?
Yeah.
Now coming on to the last topic of this particular chapter, that is the disorder of the respiratory system. The first one is the asthma. Now this is a difficulty in breathing, which causes wheezing. Like when you breathe, you make sounds. That is wheezing. So that is wheezing due to inflammation of the bronchi and the bronchioles. Remember those branches, the bronchi and the branches further. When they get inflamed, then that you can say asthma is caused. And this is an allergic disorder. Okay, it's allergy mostly. Then comes emphysema. Emphysema is the name of the next disease. It is a chronic disorder. Do you people know the difference between acute and chronic? Disorders, they are of two types. One is acute, one is chronic. See, chronic disorders are those disorders that takes place for a longer period of time. Like cancer. Cancer is a chronic disorder, right? But if you get a stomach flu, that is acute. It will happen, it will get over, and then you're done with it. It won't last years and years and years. But chronic disorders are those disorders that takes place for a longer period of time. So emphysema, it is a chronic disorder in which the alveolar walls are damaged, due to which the respiratory surface is decreased. One of the major causes of this is cigarette smoking. So when the person smokes a lot, so that tobacco chunk, or what is it called? Tar gets starting deposited in our alveoli. Okay, because of which.
Gutka, right? Gutka.
No, gutka is chewed. That is different. Okay, that is tobacco in the chewing form. Okay, cigarettes are tobacco in the smoking form. Getting my point? You will study this in class 12. So when you talk about those gutka and stuff, those are chewed and they cause mouth cancer. That's a different thing. They'll not cause any respiratory disorder. They'll cause a different disorder. Okay. But when I'm talking about smoking, so smoking is like you're inhaling it and that's going into your lungs, because people that smoke, I don't know what they do, but it's close with breathing only, right? Obviously, they're breathing the smoke, they're inhaling the smoke, as a result of which the alveolar walls, imagine that thin, delicate walls of the alveoli, they are getting damaged. If they get damaged, there is less surface area. And if there is less surface area, what will happen? Tell me.
Less exchange of gas.
Less exchange of gases. It means that which kind of breathing would a cigarette smoking person would have? Will he have slow breathing or will he have fast breathing?
Faster.
Faster. Why? Because his lungs or his or her shouldn't say his or her, whoever it is, their lungs or their alveoli will be fighting to have that oxygen, right? So that is emphysema. Then there comes the occupational disorder. Now, occupational, you might have seen people working at marble industry or people working at paper making industry or textiles or that thing, carpenters and stuff. So the work that they do, like stone breaking, grinding, dust and all, dust are tiny particles that can go inside our respiratory tract. They're so tiny that even our nasal hair cannot catch it. So what they do is that they, from our whole entire conducting passage, they go into the lungs and they start getting deposited in the lungs, which causes inflammation, leading to fibrosis of the lung. Fibrosis means, imagine the lungs becoming like lungs are very soft and spongy tissues. Imagine them becoming rock hard. Okay, imagine the lungs becoming rock hard. Fibrosis means that fibrous, it's becoming harder. So in certain industries, especially those that are involved in grinding or stone breaking, so much dust is produced that the defense mechanism of the body cannot fully cope. The nasal hair is nothing in front of it. So the long exposure can give rise to the inflammation, leading to fibrosis and thus causing serious lung damage. So the workers in such industries should wear protective masks, right? Masks should be there. What are the, see, earlier they used to have the name of the disease also, but they have removed it. I am telling you, it is, the first disease is silicosis for people that are working with silica and stuff. So silicosis, when silica gets deposited. The second is asbestosis. Okay, silicosis, asbestosis. You should remember these names because they'll ask you. They've not given it, but they'll ask you. Trust me. So you remember these names. Clear? Any doubts?
Now, what will this happen with the rate of breathing?
It will be increased, and the person will like then stop breathing. Like the lungs will stop working. Okay.
Mom, what happens in asbestosis?
Same thing. The person that is working with asbestos, it is like a plastic-like material. So people that work in their factories or their production, tiny microplastics can get lodged in our respiratory tract. It can get lodged in our lungs. I was going to say stomach, in our lungs. And because of the deposition of these asbestos, the lungs again become harder. They become hard. The respiratory surface for exchange of gases is reduced. And the person has difficulty in breathing. Yeah.
Okay, Mom. Yeah, thank you.
So any doubts up until now? Okay, there is, have you people heard about hay fever? The
Sorry?
disease called as hay fever. Not hay, H-E-Y, H-A-Y, hay.
Yeah.
What happens in it? See, there are few more diseases, two more. So the next is hay fever.
Is it getting some pollen allergy?
Many a times what happens is because of, like maybe because of the release of the pollen. Some people are allergic to pollens. Some people are allergic to dust and stuff. So in their cases, what happens is that the upper respiratory surface, the mucous membrane of that upper respiratory surface, that gets inflamed. So hay fever is the inflammation of the mucous membrane of upper respiratory system. Okay, that is the case. Now one more disease, I don't think so. Pleurisy. Pleurisy is when the pleural membrane, what is a pleural membrane?
The one covering the lungs?
Right, the pleura. So pleurisy is the inflammation of that pleural membrane. This can happen because of various reasons, but it is the inflammation of pleural membrane or pleura. Clear?
Yeah.
Any doubts? No doubts? Okay, see, I will read you that part. That is a little extra. We were talking about that thing, acclimatization thing. So it is like see, what happens initially when we go to the higher altitude, we get this thing called as altitude sickness. We feel nauseous, we feel like the urge to vomit and that is also called as mountain sickness. So it's written here, if you had ever been to any high altitude place, you must have experienced something that is called as altitude sickness. It includes nausea, fatigue, and then sudden increase in the heart rate, breathlessness, and also headache. So this is why, because there is low atmospheric pressure at higher levels of the earth, and as a result of which our body is not able to get enough oxygen. But gradually we get acclimatized, right? And we stop
What about
experiencing
seasickness? Is it the same?
seasickness. It's different. I think that is because of the motion, in my opinion. It's because of the motion, right? Being on the sea level, the water moving and stuff. Oh God, it made me so uncomfortable even thinking about it. So that is a completely different. Like no one, I don't think a person suffers from breathing difficulties at the sea. Yeah, under the water that's okay, but in the sea I don't. Like on the sea, when in on a cruise. So altitude sickness, a person gets acclimatized. Why? Because red blood cells are formed, more hemoglobin is there, and more oxygen gets delivered. Clear? So with this, we are through with the chapter. Now tell me if you people have any doubts, anything you want to repeat?
Ma'am, it can also happen when you're on a plane, right?
Yeah, it does. It does happen when you're on a plane. At high altitudes. High altitude means depth, depth, I'm saying height. Height than the normal plane that we live on.
But on
Okay.
planes, we have AC and
Not-
everything.
Not planes,
So
like
AC gives you
aeroplane,
oxygen.
like
Yes,
aeroplane.
Sanidhi?
Not
Aeroplane.
okay.
The
I thought you were
normal
talking.
flights, right? The flight you're talking about. So
Yeah.
that happens. You might feel that also. Okay, and AC is not going to do the work that real atmosphere does because the real atmosphere, it has the O2 that we need. AC doesn't give us O2. Rather, it gives us harmful gases. So even despite of like we feel pleasurable, like we feel nice because it's cold around there, but that doesn't help us in our breathing. Yeah, that is why you might have seen that airplanes also have those oxygen masks available, isn't it? That emergency mask thingies. So with this, we have actually completed the whole entire chapter. I'm so happy. So any doubts? And see, as far as the notes are concerned, don't worry. I will send you the notes. I haven't yet made it fully. See, I was going like I have almost made the notes. This part I will tell you. So these parts, the structural parts, I've made it. This like once I'm done completing your notes, I will send these notes to you so that you people can start learning. Other than that, I hope there's no doubt in the chapter. Okay, good. So let us see some questions. Let us see if you people are able to answer the questions. Which chapter should we be starting next, students? Tell me. Maha goes silent in this. You're like, you do whatever you feel like now.
I mean, I'm gonna soon not go silent because I'm shifting to
Yeah,
India in like a few days now.
in a few days.
Yeah, we booked the ticket.
Oh, when?
It's on first.
1st of June.
Yeah.
And where are you going to come in India? Like at which city?
Hyderabad.
Oh, Hyderabad. Okay. So if you come via the plane, you're coming from where? You're coming from Dubai. Where do you live?
Saudi.
Oh, Saudi. So if you experience altitude sickness, let us know. Okay. You will be experiencing it very
I
soon.
never dare.
You never did.
I flew like 100 times, but never. Except I got those ear pains sometimes.
That is again because of the high pressure. Okay. Can you see the screen, students?
Yeah.
So now answer the questions. Respiration in insects is called direct because see, nowhere in the chapter they have discussed that respiration in insect is direct, but they are giving you the question. See, this is what they do. Prepare well for your exams. So respiration in insects, it is called as direct. Why?
We didn't discuss about insects.
We have discussed about their respiratory structure. They have trachea.
Because they have
Tracheal system.
trachea, so it should be option number D, right?
Tracheal tubes are present and directly change it with their body fluid. They don't have hemoglobin, they don't have blood, they have hemocoel. Okay, regarding the functions of our respiratory system, mark the wrong one.
Mom cleans up the ear.
Exactly. Cleans up the rest of the things it does. But it will not clean up the everyone's air, right? Only the air. It will just take out the dust particles. Okay, a person suffers punctures in his chest cavity in an accident without any damage to the lungs. What would it affect? This is a nice question.
Mom, is it
B.
C?
What's the meaning of cessation?
Cessation means stoppage. Something permanently stop it.
Ma'am, B, because chest cavity and the pulmonary cavity are related.
Which one, B or D?
It's
B.
not D. It won't be D.
Then what would be the answer? Three of you have three different answers. One by one, tell me your answers and explain them to me also.
B.
B. Who says B? Maha says B.
Yeah.
Rapid increase in breathing rate. Okay. Why?
Because the chest cavity and the pulmonary cavity are interconnected, right?
Explanation is right, answer is wrong. So Nidhi, what is your answer?
You have to control, like if you're bleeding out or something, you'll have to control your breathing, right?
So
So you have to think it's A or C.
A or C? Aisha, what about you?
Mom, I think it's C because there is no damage to the lungs.
Yeah.
There's no damage to the lung. Now, if I come to all of you and I remove your ribs, I completely remove your ribs, will you be able to breathe?
No.
If your ribs won't go out, how will the volume increase? Here they are saying the chest cavity is punctured, meaning now the chest can't go lift up. There will be no increase in the volume. There will be no pressure difference. There will be no breathing in this case. Even if the lungs are not damaged, the chest cavity is damaged. So if the chest cavity is damaged, how will the chest lift up? If the chest won't lift up, the lungs won't lift up, as a result of which the volume won't increase. If the volume is not increasing, the pressure won't decrease and the air will not come in. So cessation of breathing, complete stoppage of breathing. Okay. Got it?
When the word punctures came, I imagined a punch to the chest, so I didn't think
No,
like
puncture means hole or damage. All right. Now, it is known that exposure to carbon monoxide is harmful to animals because
B.
B. It reduces oxygen transport. Yes. Why? Can someone explain? You don't. Aisha, you explain. Why? Why would it reduce the oxygen transport?
I'm not sure.
Not sure. Think. You know this. Everyone knows this. It's very, very simple. It's not difficult answer. Sanidhi, you tell me.
It is because the carbon monoxide, like the carbon dioxide in the blood, it increases.
Carbon dioxide.
Like carbon monoxide.
That's true. But what is happening that the O2 transport is being reduced?
Can I say? Like, if the animals are exposed to carbon monoxide, then they will breathe in the carbon monoxide, right? Instead of the O2. So, like, the hemoglobin, the red blood cells are coming to the alveoli to collect the oxygen. So instead of that, they will collect the CO2. And then, yeah.
And then?
So that
Then
will
what?
reduce the O2 transportation because they won't get the O2 to transport
So what
to
is
the
being
entire
formed?
body.
What is being formed because of which O2 transport is being reduced? What is the that thing? What is that combination called as?
Carbo oxy something.
Carboxyhemoglobin.
Hemoglobin.
Right, because carboxyhemoglobin is forming because CO is combining with the H. That is why the oxygen transport will be reduced. Clear? All right. Mark true statement among the following with reference to normal breathing. Okay, active passive differences you people understand? Shall I explain?
Yeah.
The difference between active and passive? See, active means anything that happens against the concentration gradient. If I say along the concentration gradient, then that means from high to low. If I say against the concentration gradient, it is from low to high. And for active transport or active of anything requires ATP. Whereas passive, it happens along the concentration gradient. Along means from high to low. Normally, high to low. Like, for example, if you are standing on top of a mountain, you push your ball or you run with your ball, you're going to run very quickly. But you take a ball and you climb a mountain, that will be difficult. You will have to spend more energy. So, when the thing is happening along the concentration gradient, we call that as passive. And here, no ATP is required, meaning no energy expenditure is required. But this active is against the concentration gradient. Against means from low to high. Okay, now answer.
B.
Which one?
D.
D. Why? Why D?
I mean, we breathe in due to the difference in the pressure between the lungs and the atmosphere, right? So it's always gonna be like higher concentration to lower concentration.
That's true. But if you think about inspiration, you are using force during that. Isn't it? You are actively, you are creating a negative pressure within you by breathing in. So, inspiration is active, expiration is passive.
Ma'am, can you explain again?
See, when we inspire, we create a negative pressure within our lungs so that that pressure gradient could be created. But initially, you put some force to breathe in. While if you compare breathing out, it's rather happening easily. as compared to the inspiration. That is why inspiration is an active process, whereas the expiration is a passive process. Clear? Okay, now a person breathes in some volume of air by forced inspiration after having a forced expiration. This quantity of air taken is called as this. If you people are not able to answer, I'll give you that benefit of the doubt, because capacity and volume you people have to learn. It will be
TV,
vital capacity.
B. Oh.
Vital capacity. After forceful inspiration, however amount of air you can forcefully expire, or after forceful expiration, how much you can forcefully inspire is vital capacity. Okay, mark the incorrect statement in context to oxygen binding to hemoglobin. Now this is good.
A.
Which of the following statement is incorrect regarding respiratory system? This is very nice, very easy.
Mom, is it A?
Is it?
A?
Yes. Why? Because
This bronchi gives rise to bronchioles, not the other way around.
yes. And the bronchioles, they finally give rise to what?
Alveoli.
Alveoli. Yes. Very good. Okay. Incidence of emphysema, which is a respiratory disorder, is high in cigarette smokers. In such cases, what happens in emphysema?
B.
The walls of the alveoli, they are damaged. Okay, respiratory process is regulated by certain specialized centers in the brain. One of the following centers can reduce the inspiratory duration. Which one is it? For the reduction? It is the pneumotaxic center. Okay, the pneumotaxic center, it can reduce the rate of inspiration. Clear? Now the CO2 dissociates from the carbaminohemoglobin when? In which condition?
B.
Okay, any justification for your answer?
CO2 will dissociate where O2 is high. Right?
Yes. Now, in breathing movements, air volume can be estimated by
D. Spirometer.
spirometer. What is the stethoscope for?
On the
Blood
breathing rate.
Breathing rate, no, heartbeat. And
blood
what is the
pressure.
sphygmomanometer for? This too, people should know.
Pressure.
Everyone has studied. Blood pressure. Okay, and spirometer is for the blood, the volume, the respiratory volume analysis, isn't it? And what about the hygrometer? What is it for? Even I don't know. Does anyone know? Pressure, I think so. No. That is for measuring the moisture or humidity. So now I have also learned a new thing. It's for measuring the moisture or humidity.
It's like a thermometer in the.
Thermometer is for temperature. Na? This is for moisture, amount of humidity that is there. Okay, I'm skipping this one. Oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve will show a right shift. One more thing, right and left shift. See, when that S-shaped curve is more towards the right, okay, it has a right shift and it has a left shift. So the left shift shows that it is combining with the oxygen strongly. The right shift shows that it is dissociating more and more. Okay. So the oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve, it will show a right shift in which condition? Right is when it will get dissociated, left is when it will get associated. So when it is going a right shift, what is it showing?
High CO2 levels are there.
Yes, high PCO2. Yes, correct. Okay, then match the following and mark the correct options. Earthworm, where should I put it?
Moist cuticles.
Moist cuticle. Insects?
Trachea.
Trachea. Fishes?
Gills.
Gills. And birds and reptiles? Okay. Done. Any doubts up until now? We're done with the basic MCQs. Now there are more questions we will solve as like once you people are done with learning this chapter. And as far as the notes are concerned, you wait for a few days. I will send it on my own. Okay. I need to form it properly so that all the things that you people got stuck on while me teaching it to you, that will be easily. I'll mention every single detail. So it will be a very long note, but you people will understand everything with that. Okay, you won't need, like, it will be NCERT proof. So there won't be anything extra. Little bit extra I'll put, which will be interesting. Okay, so with this, we had done with the chapter. Now you people tell me, shall I start the next chapter in the next, like, obviously in the next class only, but which is the next chapter after this? There is this thing. Body fluids and circulation. One of my most favorite chapter in the world. You people will enjoy it so much that I can't even express how much. See, everything you people remember double circulation from class 10.
Yeah.
Dicirculatory part. This is like in-depth, knee-deep, body-deep into that. We're going to do this chapter next. Okay. We'll complete human physiology. There was a very good chapter before breathing also, that was digestion. That was also a very good chapter. But fortunately for you, it has been removed.